UFC 311 has come and gone. The first pay-per-view event for the Ultimate Fighting Championship in 2025 is in the books, and we will talk about the two championship fights at the top of the bill in the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, California. The main event, we saw Islam Makhachev defend his lightweight championship, and in the co-main event, we saw Merab Dvalishvili defend his bantamweight championship. Two champions entered UFC 311, and the same two champions will leave UFC 311 with gold wrapped around their waist. Let's recap both of those title fights and what is next for both champions. One discussion, maybe not as long because, well, the fight didn't go very long. And then another discussion, maybe we have some more fun things to discuss. But let's start with the king of the UFC right now, the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Islam Makhachev, and still. So I guess we start this discussion by addressing the elephant in the room. On Friday, during weigh-ins, we found out that Arman Tsarukyan was pulled from his rematch against Islam Makhachev in the main event of UFC 311 due to an injury with his back that would not allow him to move or be very mobile and finish his weight cut. He was removed from the card, and the UFC was left scrambling, and us as an MMA community were left scrambling. But it's convenient that we had a number 9 ranked lightweight versus a number 10 ranked lightweight on the main card of UFC 311, and that is where the UFC rang Renato the Money Man Moicano. He accepted the challenge, had his fight with Beneil Dariush scrapped. Quick side note, Beneil Dariush was awarded his show money and win money for not having to fight on Saturday night. And Renato Moicano, who was on a 4-fight win streak in this lightweight division, was thrust in to a championship fight in 36 hours time. So the new main event of UFC 311, it was no longer the rematch 5 years in the making between Makhachev and Tsarukyan, but instead it was Makhachev versus Moicano. So fast forward about a day and a half and we are at UFC 311. The co-main event has just come to an end, and now it is time for the championship main event. Renato Moicano makes his way to the octagon. Islam Makhachev alongside Habib Nurmagomedov makes his way to the octagon to square off for the lightweight championship of the world, and we would see Islam Makhachev retain his title in 4 minutes and 5 seconds. That's all it took. It didn't need a second round. It didn't need a third round. It didn't even need a full first round for Islam Makhachev to get the Darce choke submission just like he did against Dustin Poirier in June of 2024. He is now the all-time leader in lightweight championship wins and the all-time leader in title defenses with 5 and 4 respectively. His win streak overall now sits at 15, and his lightweight win streak now sits at 14, tied for second all-time with Kamaru Usman amongst all weight classes and all-time records in the lightweight division. We just have to sit here and enjoy it and recognize greatness while we have it. Islam Makhachev has not lost a fight in nearly 10 years. October 3rd of 2015, that is when he got knocked out by Adriano Martins, and he has not looked back since, and he has put together one of the most elite resumes in recent memory. 2 victories over an all-time great in Alexander Volkanovski, title defenses over Dustin Poirier, and yes, it's not the rightful number 1 contender that was Arman Tsarukyan, but it was the number 10 ranked 4-fight win streak surging Renato Moicano, and while it was a short notice fight for Moicano, that means it's also a short notice fight for Islam Makhachev, and he disposed of him in less than 1 full round. You add in finishes of Charles Oliveira, Bobby King Green, now known as King Green, Dan Hooker, Thiago Moises, and Drew Dober. Those are all finishes. This man is at the top of his game right now. He is in his prime, and he rightfully sits amongst the top of the top in the entire organization right now. And the biggest question is who is next for Islam Makhachev, because, well, no matter which way you want to split it, it's going to be a rematch. But will it be Arman Tsarukyan, his originally scheduled opponent for UFC 311, or will it be Charles Oliveira, who earned his shot to face the winner of Makhachev versus Tsarukyan after he beat Michael Chandler over the course of 5 rounds in November at UFC 309. We know that the rematch between Makhachev and Tsarukyan is 5 years in the making, dating back to April of 2019, whereas the rematch with Charles Oliveira is a little bit more fresh. That was October 22nd, 2022 at UFC 280. That is where Islam Makhachev became the lightweight champion of the world. Now do we go full circle and have Oliveira versus Makhachev 2, the rematch for the title, this time Makhachev the champion and Oliveira the challenger. I want to know what you think in the comments below about the whole Arman Tsarukyan debacle. And do you think just because he did go down with an injury at the end of the day that was out of his control, at least to our knowledge, he should still get his shot that he had earned by putting together the last 4 wins in a row that he had? Or do you want to see Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, who's coming off of a win over Michael Chandler, and prior to that at UFC 300 in April of last year, a loss to Arman Tsarukyan? Do you want to see him get his rematch instead? And lastly, please let me know and just give your thoughts on Islam Makhachev as a champion and as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Do you agree that he is the creme de la creme at the tippy top of the mountain in the UFC right now? Or do you think that belongs to someone else like a John Jones, like an Alex Pereira, or someone else? And I want to finish this discussion with one final question. Is Islam Makhachev the greatest lightweight of all time? And from the main event of UFC 311, we jump into the co-main event of UFC 311, where, much like Islam Makhachev, Merab Dvalishvili successfully defended his championship, but for him, it was his first ever title defense after winning the belt back at Noche UFC in September of 2024. I talked about the win streak of Islam Makhachev, now sitting at 15, tied for the second most all-time in UFC history, regardless of weight class. Well, now let's talk about the 12-fight win streak for Merab Dvalishvili as he is slowly trying to catch up to Islam Makhachev. How beautiful of a story is it that we see 2 of the longest win streaks in the current era of the UFC defending their titles on the very same night, and both doing it successfully, retaining the gold, and combined are on a 27-fight win streak. Makhachev has not lost since 2015, and Merab, he's not lost since April of 2018, and I talked about how insane his resume was heading into this fight with the undefeated Umar Nurmagomedov, and he just made it that much more impressive as he gets the unanimous decision victory over the then 18-0 Umar Nurmagomedov, 6-0 in the UFC, and he did it how we are used to seeing him find success, and that is with his unrelenting pressure, pace, and grappling. He truly is not human. He really is a machine. There may not be another more accurate nickname in the UFC right now. This fight was an absolute classic if we're talking bantamweight championship history for the UFC, a back-and-forth war of attrition where the first 2 rounds were pretty strong for Umar Nurmagomedov, yet competitive in the latter 3 rounds, including those championship rounds 4 and 5, where we see people really prove how damn elite that they are, belonging to the side of the champion, Merab, as on all 3 judges' scorecards, he won rounds 3, 4, 5, and on one of the 3 scorecards, also won round 1, and Umar winning rounds 1 and 2 on 2 scorecards, and just round 2 on another. This was a beautiful display of all things in mixed martial arts, to be quite honest with you. Umar Nurmagomedov looked lightning quick on the feet with his hand speed and his kicks up the middle and head kicks. Merab looked decent in the striking. He had a lot of wide looping strikes, but he was also very quick, very sharp as well. I thought he landed a lot of very convincing shots on the feet. And again, round by round, Umar Nurmagomedov, much like Sean O'Malley, much like Henry Cejudo, much like Petr Yan, much like Jose Aldo, much like Marlon Moraes, they all begin to wilt under the pressure of Merab. No one can keep up with him. No one quite has a gas tank like the machine Merab Dvalishvili, and he was able to find success in rounds 3, rounds 4, and rounds 5, and it was a very convincing victory by the time it was all said and done. And before we talk about what's next for Merab, I just have to say that Umar Nurmagomedov absolutely still has championship aspirations, and I believe before he hangs it up, he will have gold wrapped around his waist, but it just was not his time yet, and that's okay. He's 29 years old, had never experienced defeat before. This is a learning moment for him. Go back to the drawing board. How can he then bounce back later on in 2025 and learn from the mistakes of this fight, build upon the success that he had in this fight, and turn the ship around like I absolutely believe that he will do, especially with Khabib Nurmagomedov in his corner. But UFC 311 belonged to the champion, Merab Dvalishvili. He has now successfully defended his title for the first time, took the title from Sean O'Malley in September at Noche UFC last year. Now, what comes next? Well, if we go back to UFC Macau in China in November, we had, in my opinion, what was a #1 contendership bout between Petr Yan and Deiveson Figueiredo, the former flyweight champion. We would see Petr Yan get a decision victory in that fight, and he has now won back-to-back fights over Song Yadong and Deiveson Figueiredo. So you pair that 2-fight win streak over 2 top 10 opponents with the history that he has with Merab Dvalishvili, being that they fought each other in March of 2023. Now 2 years later, do we see that fight get rammed back for the next bantamweight championship fight? We also know that Sean O'Malley was in attendance at UFC 311, watching very closely leading into the event. Dana White had mentioned that Sean would be there and maybe could possibly fight the winner of this fight. I couldn't disagree more, if I'm being quite honest with you. He won the title and defended it one time against someone who wasn't really a true #1 contender in Marlon Chito Vera. I don't think that Sean O'Malley is light years away from challenging for his title and trying to get it back a second time, but I do think he needs to at least win one fight post losing back in September. Then we can talk business. So in my opinion, I want to see Merab Dvalishvili run it back in a championship fight against Petr Yan, a former champion in this division as well. Then I want to see Sean O'Malley take on the #4 ranked Sandman, Corey Sandhagen. That's one of the fights that I want to see most in this 135-pound division. Then if we want to peel it back just a little bit further, we have confirmed bouts in the bantamweight division. In the main event of UFC Seattle at the end of February, we have Henry Cejudo, who's #7, taking on the #8 ranked Song Yadong, and we have the #9 ranked Rob Font taking on former champion Dominic Cruz in what is Cruz's retirement fight. But we have 3 gentlemen there, #7, #8, and #9, that can all get big wins and put themselves one step closer to title contention in this weight class, but that's a February discussion. They still have work to do. Right now, we can for sure make Merab versus Peter, and we can for sure make Sean versus Corey. So that's what I want to do. But do you agree with me? Is that the path of this bantamweight division as we get into the rest of 2025 and what could be a potential 3-fight year for Merab Dvalishvili if everything goes to plan for him? We could see the potential bounce back of Sean O'Malley, one of the bigger stars in the UFC, although he did get booed quite a lot in this Los Angeles crowd. And we can see former champion Henry Cejudo, a young up-and-comer, even though he's been in the UFC forever now, and Song Yadong, and Rob Font, a seasoned veteran, all make their way one step closer in February, potentially. Let me know in the comments below how you would match and make this bantamweight division, and most importantly, of course, the title. Who is next for Merab Dvalishvili? And while we're at it, who do you think should be next for Umar Nurmagomedov now that I'm thinking about it? I say we do Umar Nurmagomedov versus either Rob Font, Song Yadong, or Henry Cejudo, depending on who all of the winners are that night in February in Seattle. So let me know all of your thoughts and your opinions and your takeaways from the 2 championship fights at UFC 311. Islam Makhachev and still 15 wins in a row, 14 in a row at lightweight, 5 title victories, 4 title defenses, and the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world today. And for Merab, 12 consecutive victories, his first title defense, the all-time leader in win streaks for the bantamweight division at 11, 2 historic runs at the same exact time. UFC 311 was one for the books. If you enjoyed this recap of the title fights, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, where every single week I recap the most meaningful results from every single card. Heading into each card, I break down the best fights and preview the biggest storylines and what is at stake. I also give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements as well, and you can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA. Lastly, you can follow along on your favorite podcast listening platform, such as Spotify and Apple, where those episodes release every Monday and Friday. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.